I think back to Ecclesiastes, right? There is a time
and a place
for everything. Everything's got a time and a place. And we have to be so much, I get it. We're Americans, we live in the 21st century. We like things to go at the speed of light. And we like to be able to say, I did that. I made that. I built that. I did this. I did that. God did that. Right? And so I think if I can encourage anybody with something, it's take a moment to look back at your life and see all the ways, all the things that you've done that God really did through you, because that's what made me really get to that last point of submission, I think, is looking back and saying, how did I get passed over for so many jobs? Why did I end up in Charleston, South Carolina, of all places? And it's because the Lord had his hand in everything. He'll never leave us. He'll never forsake us. And so even if, for those of you out there that are listening right now, if you don't know exactly what's next in your life, you don't know what's coming up next, that's okay, because the Lord does.
Yeah. Welcome to the Reality Is podcast, where we talk about real life and real faith. My name is Joey. I'm the worship pastor here at Crossroads Community Church. And today I am joined by Quin, our kids and family pastor here at Crossroads Community Church. And we're super excited to be talking about this topic today because you and I actually share a lot of things in common when it comes to transition. That's right. The word of the day. But before we start talking about transition, I like people to kind of get to know us a little bit. And so, and I didn't tell you I was going to do this, but this is great because you were just talking about your bread making ability and your bread making skills. In fact, for Christmas, you gave everybody a jar to take home and make bread. Now, you gave me something special that was not a jar of bread because in our home, we are gluten-free and we couldn't eat the bread.
You're welcome for my thoughtfulness.
And I love that. I really appreciate that. Problem is, you never gave me a recipe of how to make these ingredients. And so I've got this jar that's been sitting in my house since Christmas that's like a cookie jar that says, hey man, kids, we're gonna make some cookies. Man, Quin got us some cookies to make for Christmas. And we're still waiting to make those. And I keep asking you, and you are telling me, yeah, I'll get you the recipe. You want to tell me why I haven't gotten the recipe yet?
Well, the funny thing, Joey, is the internet is so helpful, isn't it? But when you forget to print the recipe and you forget to save the recipe, then you end up with a jar of stuff. So maybe you need some more salt in there. Maybe you need eggs. Maybe you need water. Don't know how much you might need.
No, anything.
Best of luck.
Best of luck. We're just going to try. We're going to add some stuff to it and see what this cookie comes out looking like or tasting like. It's a gluten-free something of a cookie. You did say it was snickerdoodle, which I love snickerdoodle.
It's supposed to be snickerdoodle, but I might have messed that up too. Who knows?
Oh, man. Well, I just want to let you know on air and in front of all these people, I'm very thankful for you getting me a jar of cookie dough recipe that we'll never be able to make in our life.
And I think the moral of the story here is if I offer any of you listening out there today a jar of stuff, just say no. Just don't.
Thank you. It. Why don't you keep your jar, man? Keep your jar. But seriously, you guys were talking about the bread making this morning, and you seem to be like an expert of this bread making thing. Can you, like, I know I didn't say we were doing any of this, but you just walked through this like process of making bread.
Yeah.
Can you just kind of repeat that? Because you do a lot of work.
Yeah. We get 4 cups of flour. We sift it out. We level it out. We do all the work. My wife cheers me on.
But you said sifting is the key because you can't just dump it in there.
Can't just dump it in there, man. It's got to be prepared before you put it in there, or else you're going to end up with a weird crumb structure and all those other words you hear on the Great British Baking Show. I know you guys watch it. I know you do. So,
did you just admit you watch that show?
Oh, every single season. I watch it on the days it comes out.
I'm so glad I'm not the only brother watching the British baking show. Thank you. There are two of us.
There are 2 of us here. Yeah, that's right. And then after that, we add in our salt, we add our yeast in, we add a little bit of water in. Warm water. It's got to be a certain temperature. You got to keep your bread at a certain temperature for the bacteria and the yeast.
This is so fascinating.
And you just mix it up. We cover it with the cheesecloth. We're not fancy enough to have the bread covers yet. We haven't upgraded our setup. But we do that, and then we just rock and roll. And actually, what I normally do is I pre-make all of the dry ingredients in mason jars so that when I want bread, I can just take the jar out and dump it in the bowl and go. And man, we love it.
I love that. And here's what I'm going to vie for. That we have, instead of a British baking contest, a bread baking contest here at Crossroads Community Church. Anybody out there who believes they've got the best bread, and I already heard some people say that their bread is the best, we are going to offer this challenge right now. Bread baking contest, and Joey would love to be the one sampling all of the bread. Okay, so seriously, we're here to talk about transition today, and now we're going to transition into what that even looks like, what that even means, and why we get to talk about that today. I looked up the dictionary definition of the word transition, and it says it's a process or a period of changing from one state or condition to another. Yeah. And why did I bring you on here to talk about transitioning? Because you and I have similar stories of what transition looks like. In fact, you and I were going to be doing something together, and you decided to transition out and do something else, but we'll get to that in the future.
That's
but
right.
Will you just kind of share your story of how you even went from Texas, because you say you're a Texas guy, who wears boots, which is another funny thing for me, but that's all right. You're a boot-wearing brother from Texas.
Watches the Great British Baking Show.
Watches the Great British Baking Show. The things you guys are finding out today is amazing. But tell us that transition from Texas to here. And I know there's some in-betweens there.
Yeah, I mean, so I grew up in Texas, in a cattle country, small town, one stoplight. It was a great time. I went to school at Mississippi State University, all right, another cattle country kind of place. They call it the Cow College, and loved it every second of the way. After that, I actually went back to Texas thinking I was going to go home and kind of do the whole band directing, teaching thing. That's what I had prepared for the past, 5-6 years was I'm going to be a band director in Texas and I'm going to have a championship band. Like, that's what I wanted. So I spent a year in Texas and just realized that it wasn't quite the environment I needed. So I started applying different places. My wife and I got married around that time. Started applying everywhere, about 30 different jobs. And out of all those, I got an offer from one. And it was in Charleston, South Carolina. And what's so funny, Joey, is before we even started applying, we literally printed a map of the country. We laid it on the table, and we just crossed out every state that we did not want to move. And lo and behold, South Carolina, it was like the first to go.
You crossed it out.
Don't want to go. No Florida, no South Carolina. Get it out of here. Who wants it? Who likes it? Nothing, right? And lo and behold, that's the place that I got my job.
God and his humor, right?
Right. And then when I get here, I'm not even teaching band. I'm teaching orchestra.
Hold up. For some people, that means nothing. They're like, what's the difference between an orchestra and a band? Sure. But that's okay.
I'm suddenly teaching something I'm not totally prepared for. I mean, you're talking, I had 5-6 classes in college about how to teach band. I had one on string. So I knew what string instruments looked like. Other than that, I was kind of in over my head. So we move here. I start doing that. We found Crossroads our second week here from a little tiny sign about this big on the side of the road that said Crossroads Community Church, that way.
Yeah.
And so we tried it out, started playing with you on the worship team.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I hit a really interesting part in my faith where I realized I had never followed the Lord in scriptural baptism. That big moment of obedience that I just never did.
I remember that.
And so I wrestled with it, and that's a story for another day. But I finally decided to submit through God's grace to that. Was baptized, and it was probably the Monday after that I told you, I think I'm being called to ministry.
Yep.
And I didn't really know what to do with that. And you were so gracious to help me, kind of coach me through all that. And then another year passed, and
and I thought, hey, and this is the other part of the transition, because I was looking and going, man, you and I spent, I think, a little over a year together prepping and training and saying, all right, you're going to be a worship leader. Let's prep you. Let's get you ready for that. You were assisting me. You were leading. You were doing all type of things.
Yeah.
And then lo and behold, it was like, Joey, God's not calling me to do this. What? What do you mean?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It was like a double transition almost, because it was a transition out of something I loved, because I loved being a teacher. it was calling me out of being a teacher and into ministry. And then it was calling me out of the ministry that I had planned and prepared for into a ministry I was totally unprepared. Well, I was more prepared than I thought I was,
Absolutely.
but I felt totally out of my depth. And I knew I had to rely on the Lord's strength to get through that.
And that's where I think it's so important, where we learn that, sometimes we're uncomfortable in doing the things that God wants us to do. But it says in Proverbs 3:5-6, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, and in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path.
Right.
And that's exactly what was happening with you. You were saying, hey, Lord, this is one of the things that I believe I'm supposed to do.
Right.
But then he says, no, this is where I want to take you. And you go, well, what am I supposed to do? Trust in the Lord.
Absolutely.
That's what you're supposed to do. And I believe the Lord wants to keep us in a place of this somewhat uncomfortable state.
Yeah.
That way we continually trust in him, right?
Right.
You don't want to sit there and kind of depend on your own strength to
Sure.
actually get things done for the kingdom.
Right.
Because are we really doing God's will or doing God's work at that point?
Exactly. And that's the part of it that I had to kind of wrestle with, is that I had the skill set to go up there and lead worship without trusting in the Lord. But that wouldn't have been for God. That would have been for me and my ego, right? And not for God's glory. And so I remember the first couple of weeks in the children's ministry, I was so overwhelmed. I was just like, I don't even know how to help here. I don't know what to do to make this more effective. And it really, really forced me to trust in God. And so when we were preparing for this podcast, I started looking through the Old Testament at some of the figures in the Old Testament. And pretty much all of them had major transitions they had to go through.
Yes, they did.
Right. And I started thinking about, well, what's different in all their transitions? And so as I did this, I kind of landed on Joseph, because I think that his transition is one that I can really relate to. Right? Because his whole life, Joseph knew exactly from the time he was a kid until the time he went to Egypt, he knew exactly what he was going to do with his life. He was going to take care of sheep. That was what he was going to do. He was going to, take the family business. He was going to do his thing. Easy peasy.
Yeah.
Then he finds himself in a pit, and then he finds himself in Egypt, and all of that changes. And I just think about how my life and my path changed so much. And then even when I thought I knew where it was going, I thought, okay, I'm going to be a worship pastor. Got it. Makes sense. Just like Joseph gets to Egypt, he becomes one of Pharaoh's household. Okay, I'm in Egypt. I'm doing okay. Great.
Yep. Absolutely.
And then it was like, oh, wait, nope, here are your brothers that threw you in the pit, right? Something he totally didn't expect, but that God worked through him on, So...
And so that's kind of how that transition looked in your life.
Yeah.
And now, and I remember when you and I sat, we were in my office, we were talking about it, and we were trying to come up with this plan. But then we thought, we've got to commit the plan to the Lord.
Right.
And we have to let him direct your steps, right? That's what it says in Proverbs 16.
Absolutely.
Commit your plans to the Lord, and he will direct your steps.
Yeah.
And your transition is a lot like mine. Now, I was in a secular world, as you know, and I had a plan for my life. A lot like you say, Joseph had a plan for his life. I knew from the time that I was 4 years old what I was going to be doing with my life. I was an entertainer. I was in show business. I knew this is the direction I'm going to go. This is how I'm going to do it. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. Now, granted, I didn't grow up, in a Christian household, per se. I mean, I grew up in Catholicism. I went to Catholic school. I did know who the Lord was, but I didn't know him personally. So I wasn't saved. I didn't have this personal relationship with Jesus. But when I did, later on, it was around 17 years old when I got saved. And so now here I am. I'm still off. I'm performing. I'm doing these things. But I'm doing it now with the Lord in my heart. And so when the Lord said to me, and he had been kind of tugging at my heart, saying, this isn't the direction I want you to go. This isn't what I want you to do. I immediately said, yes, it is what you want me to do. Wait, are you kidding me, Lord? Like, since the time I was 4 years old, this is what I have done. This is who I am. Now, here I am claiming who I am in Christ.
Sure.
And God's tugging on my heart, and he's saying, no, I don't want you to do this. This isn't the direction you're supposed to be going. And I'm like, yes, it is the direction I'm supposed to be going. And I'm just I said this on the podcast the other day. A lot of times people like knock on the door or they, Lord, give me an open door. I'm seeing the door. I'm kicking the door down because this is the direction I'm supposed to go.
Right.
And I'm just bringing the Lord with me in this direction.
Right.
But the Lord was saying, no, this isn't where I want you to go. Right. And so here I am now, as you know, and some of the people listening know, I'm on the road. I'm touring. I'm doing all these things. Right. Opening up for different artists out there. Yep. And then God clearly says, this isn't what I want you to do. And I'm struggling now because I'm going, no, God, I really believe this is what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. Right. And I remember I'm in Mexico and my wife and I were in Mexico and she leans over to me and she says, God does not want you with this group anymore. You need to leave this group. And I'm devastated. But she didn't tell me something that was new. Right. All she did was confirm something that God had already put on my heart for such a long time.
Sure.
And so now I'm wrestling with God. I'm crying. I'm up all night, a lot like I didn't want my hip to be, removed out of joint. So I said, okay, let me stop the wrestling. Let me just give in. But this is my version of giving in to the Lord. I said, fine, God. If you don't want me singing with this group anymore, then I'm just not going to sing anymore. I'm going to go and work at Starbucks. Oh. and a lot of people are like, so what did you do? I went and I worked at Starbucks. I'm not even kidding. So for me, the transition was so hard because I didn't want what the Lord had for me, although what the Lord's plan for my life was much better than the plan I had. Right. But still, I had this desire so badly to do what I wanted to do on my own. And, eventually I gave in. I did start singing again. Right. I left Starbucks and then, transitioned into becoming a worship leader. And that's something I can get into later. But did you ever have that moment where you felt, okay, the Lord's calling me to not do this, but I want to do this. And Lord, I'm going to kind of put you off on the side because I really want to go this direction. Or did you, unlike me, say, okay, God, this is what you want me to do. I'm going to do it.
Well, yes and no, actually, because I think when it came to actually following his will into ministry, I didn't really have a problem with it. Even though I did not want to leave my job as a teacher. I knew that I had to, and it was just kind of like, okay, this is what I just got to do, right? But I will say no in the sense that it took me 12 years from salvation to obedience. So I had 12 years of just saying, Lord, I know I'm saved, but I can still do my own thing. And what is so crazy is that, I remember vividly in high school, having moments of, I think I'm being called to ministry. No, that's just a cop out. Oh, I think I'm being called to ministry. Nah, I'm just trying to find an easy way to have a job or something. I just thought those things. And so I just kept pushing it back and pushing it back. And that whole time, I still hadn't followed a basic thing of obedience. And that was just being baptized. So yes, it was easy for me to submit when the time came, but it took 12 years of rebellion for me to get there.
Wow. Yeah, for me, it took pretty much all my life. but even in the midst of, hey, this is what you're supposed to be doing. And I said, no, God, this is what I love about the Lord. Yeah. The Lord still loved me. The Lord said, I have a plan for you, and I'm going to get you there. I get it. You're pouting right now. I get it. But I still love you. I still have a plan for you. It's a much better plan than working at Starbucks, I promise you. Yeah. But are you going to give into it? And I'm very thankful because my mentor at the time came in and saw me at Starbucks. He was like, what are you doing? You're like back in town? And you were on the road. You're at yeah. And so he called me to his office, and that's when he said, look, I know what you've been doing on the road. I know that you've been writing and producing, doing all these type of things. I would love for you to do that here at the church, And my wife was like, I told you the Lord had a better plan for you. He still wanted to use you in the gifting that you had, but he wanted to use my gifting for his glory. And sometimes
That's right.
that's a hard thing for people to wrap their mind around and wrap their brain around, because we were just saying this earlier before the podcast started, how prideful and selfish we are. The heart is wicked and deceitful above all things. Who can know it, right? We've just got this pride in ourselves, and everything I had been doing had been for my own glory. And now here's the Lord saying, no, I want you to use your gifting for my glory. And what is that going to look like? And so I finally, really gave in, because the first time I gave in pouting. But this time I gave in and I said, okay, Lord, how do you want to use me? And this is where you had talked about earlier. I was so scared because I did not know how to sing for God.
Right.
Honestly, I knew how to perform. I knew how to entertain, but worship was something completely different.
Yeah.
That's a state of, I am drawing people into the presence of the Lord.
Right.
And now what do I have to do? I have to call on the Lord to help me to be able to do that. And people, and you know this about me, but people are still shocked when they hear that I'm up on Saturday nights freaking out because I am so nervous about Sunday morning. I still get nervous about Sunday morning. And I believe the Lord has left that in my heart and in my mind so that I learn to call on him.
Right.
Because if I try to do it in my own strength, I will fail. And there's somebody in this room who can testify to that because they were a part of that. Yeah, I don't even know if I want to embarrass myself because it seems like every week he's already laughing. He's saying, do it, tell the story. Okay, so
you got to do it.
I have to tell the story. Every week I seem to embarrass myself on this podcast. But
that's why we actually created the podcast.
The reality is Joey's going to tell another embarrassing story. So it was Christmas. And this was one of those years where Christmas Eve and Christmas Day felt like the next day. It was like, I had to do one, then I had to do the next. And so for Christmas Day, I thought, I'm going to really simplify this. I'm going to do some real scaled back stuff. And I'm just going to do Christmas carols. This is easy. And so I really, really, really worked hard on Christmas Eve. And so Christmas Eve was over. I did not prepare for Christmas Day because it was, I'm just doing some Christmas carols.
Right.
Like, what do I have to prepare for? So here we are, Christmas Day. I'm up there with the team. And I start playing and I'm singing. We get through the first song and I go to do the second song and it's Hark the Herald Angels Sing. But I'm going, hark the herald angels sing, glory to the, and it's so people are like, wait, and I'm watching the congregation look at me go, they're trying to sing along, but they're going, he's singing angels we have heard on high, but those are the lyrics to hark the herald, what? And so the team literally turns around and looks at me like, what are you doing? Rhett, who's on the guitar at this point, is bent over laughing on the stage at me. The people in the congregation are laughing at me. And I don't understand what's wrong because I'm doing it. It's one of those things where it was the most embarrassing moment of me leading worship because here I went into this thing completely unprepared, thinking in my own strength, thinking in my own power. I got this.
Right.
Because it's easy. It's hymns. Well, first of all, you look at me and go, Joey, what do you know about a hymn? But that's a whole other story. And I realized at that moment, I cannot do this in my own strength. As simple as it may sound, I can't do it. So that transition for me was very hard to go from secular entertainer to now I'm leading people into worship.
Yeah.
And your transition is you went from musician to now you're teaching kids, little ones, about Jesus.
Yeah, and that's one of the weirder things is, I taught middle school band. So if you've ever wanted to just like test how strong your eardrums really are, you should teach middle school band. And if you really want to learn patience, I've got some excellent classes that you can go watch. right? Middle school band. And I felt a sense of duty as a teacher and in middle school to prepare them for high school and for life that was coming later. And
Mhm.
so there was a certain element of my job that I had to be kind of hard on them because better they learn that there's consequences for your actions in middle school
Mhm.
where the consequences are relatively safe than as an adult where the consequences are life altering.
Yeah.
Right. And I really took that to heart. And also these are middle schoolers. They can control their actions and different things like that.
Mhm.
And so going from that to an environment where the most important thing I can teach is not responsibility. The most important thing I can teach is grace.
Mm.
That was tough for me at first because I was so used to the expectation of I need to teach you how to survive in the world to I need to teach you how to love the Lord. Right. And that was
Absolutely.
hard for me. And just the age difference because, my job went from mainly, please put those Takis up to, hey, man, give me a high five. So very different daily interactions there. And that was tough. But
Takis. I love Takis. Anyway,
oh,
continue.
man, yeah. Oh, do I have stories about Takis? Goodness gracious.
We don't have time to talk about Takis.
That's right. That's right. This is not sponsored by Takis. We should mention, right? So one of the verses that I think really helps to kind of think about this is in Psalm 32. It says, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my eye upon you. And it doesn't say I have instructed, I have taught, I have counseled. It says I will.
I will. Yep.
Right? It's all, even, and that's the crazy thing about transitions. Even once we transition into what we think the Lord has us to do, we're still transitioning.
Yeah, it's a
Constant transitions because we're constantly being renewed, constantly being transformed, being closer to Christ's image. And that's the whole point. And it's so reassuring to know that God is going to counsel me, not that he's finished with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And so here's what I want to talk about now as we transition this part of talking about transition is there are people out there who are in a position right now where they are about to transition from one thing to another. And that can be anything. That can be moving, to a new state, new house, new school, anything like that. And I just kind of wanted to leave some encouragement with them. You've heard our story. Most of it, in fact, all of it, I would say, is all about trusting, depending, and leaning on the Lord. I said earlier, commit your works to the Lord and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him.
That's right.
And so I just want to share some verses with people out there who may be going through a transition right now. One of the encouraging things for me, especially in transitioning, is I always kept the word in front of me. I always had to have verses that encouraged me because there was a lot of things, especially. So I transitioned from Florida to Virginia, and that was a tough transition for me because here I am now thinking I'm doing what the Lord is calling me to do. And the Lord once again says, okay, time for you to move away from here. And I'm going, no, it's not. I know y'all are thinking, Joe, you were so hard-headed. I used to be, kind of. Stop it. We aren't getting into that. But the point was, again, here I am thinking I'm doing something for the Lord, and I'm doing something that's making me feel good. I'm glorifying myself once again in this, and God's saying, I want to transition you to someplace else.
Yep.
And so I transitioned from Florida to Virginia, go from a very large church to a very small church. I mean, in comparison, 30,000 people to 30 people.
Right.
And I'm going, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? Lord, is this what you call me to do? And I went through some struggles there, but I always had these verses that were brought to my mind because I kept scripture with me to help me through the transition. And so one of them, Proverbs 16:9, it says, a man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. You and I were talking about a plan. This is the plan that we have. This is what I want to do, but I've got to commit it to the Lord.
That's right.
Because if I'm trying to do my own plan and not have the Lord a part of that plan, it's really going to, I think, go in the wrong direction from what the Lord's trying to call you to do.
Absolutely.
And it's like I said before, I'm kicking down a door. So what would you say to something like that?
Yeah, it's so important to plan. Sometimes we think, okay, I'm going to trust the Lord in this situation. I'm just going to give it totally up to him. I'm not going to have a plan at all.
And that's wrong.
That's wrong. That's not a good solution because, like you just read from Scripture, it's good to have a plan.
Absolutely.
But you have to be willing to bend and not break. You have to be willing to say, I'm going to make this plan knowing that it's coming from a sinful, broken human being, and it's not nearly as good as what the Lord has for me, right? And I think that's key. And I think about Saul, right? Saul was ordained by God as the king of Israel. And then somewhere along the way, Saul started making his own plans as king.
Yep.
Which was
Yes, he
okay,
did.
he was making plans, but then when the Lord had something else for him, he stopped following what the Lord had.
Absolutely.
He thought himself stronger than the Lord's plans, and that caused issues for him, right? And so, yeah, that's my thought on that.
One of the other encouragement things that I wanted to leave with was Deuteronomy 31:8 says,
Yeah.
and the Lord, he is the one who goes before you. He will be with you. He will not leave you nor forsake you. Do not fear nor be dismayed. And that was one of the things that I really had to lean on because sometimes you're in this valley. Like, yeah, it's a transition that the Lord has called me on and he's put me on, but it just feels wrong right now. Like God, are you really in this? And to know that he went before me.
Yeah, that's right.
He's right there with me. He's never going to leave me. He's not going to forsake me. So I shouldn't have to worry.
Right. And even though our circumstances change, right? Our lives change, our jobs change, our families change, God does not change, right? There's a scripture from James, every good and perfect gift is from above. And that includes the things that we don't know are good gifts at the time, right? Like the transitions we're nervous about or worried about. It says he's come down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. So even if everything else in the world around you can change, God does not change. His goodness does not change, and his mercy doesn't change.
Yeah.
Right?
I used to sit and hang on this one. I didn't write this one down, but I have it in my head. It's from Psalms, so you guys may want to look this one up somewhere. But it says, where can I go from your spirit?
Yep.
Where can I go from your presence? From the heavens down to the deepest valley,
That's right.
You are there. If I rise up on the wings of the dawn, if I travel beyond the sea, even there, your hand will lead me. Your right hand will hold me. And that's what I had to lean on, knowing that God, no matter where I go, no matter what I'm doing, God is right there with me. His right hand is holding me up.
right.
He goes before me.
That's right.
He has a plan
right.
for me. And everything is going to work together for good for those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. Well, I know I'm called. He called me and said, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Now, for me, it was worship. For you, it was children. For somebody else, it may be a truck driver. For somebody else, it may be in sales. Whatever it is, you're called to do it. And the Lord is there with you.
That's right.
What I want to make sure is that in the transition that is happening in whoever's life, whoever is transitioning, that they know that they are taking the Lord with them. In fact, the Lord has gone before them.
And that's such a beautiful thing because you said that he holds us with his right hand.
Yeah.
Who sits at the right hand of the Father?
Don't make me beat you up on the podcast.
We're talking about Jesus. Joey, you cannot be violent today on the podcast.
I know. But that's so exciting.
So you have the Lord going before you. You have Jesus beside you. And you have the Holy Spirit in you. I mean, you talk about people in your corner, right?
Yeah. It doesn't get any better than that.
Doesn't get any better than that.
So here's what I want to say. As we are getting to the point of closing, I want you to be able to tell people out there some type of encouraging statement. I know what you have gone through. You know what I have gone through. And so what encouragement can you leave them with before we get out of here?
I think back to Ecclesiastes, right? There is a time for everything. Everything's got a time and a place. And we have to be so much, I get it. We're Americans, we live in the 21st century. We like things to go at the speed of light. And we like to be able to say, I did that. I made that. I built that. I did this. I did that. God did that. Right. And so I think if I can encourage anybody with something, it's take a moment to look back at your life and see all the ways, all the things that you've done that God really did through you, because that's what made me really get to that last point of submission, I think, is looking back and saying, how did I get passed over for so many jobs? Why did I end up in Charleston, South Carolina, of all places? And it's because the Lord had his hand in everything. He'll never leave us. He'll never forsake us. And so even if, for those of you out there that are listening right now, if you don't know exactly what's next in your life, if you don't know what's coming up next, that's okay, because the Lord does.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the Lord's going to guide those steps. So don't be anxious about anything, but by prayer and supplication, make your request with thanksgiving. Make your request known to God.
I'm so glad you said that, because I was going to, in my closing, say one of the things I challenge people to do, and I do this myself, is I look back. And I look back at what the Lord did in my life, not what he didn't do. Because a lot of times you want to look back and go, oh, I should have done this and I could have done that, and how come I didn't? But when I look back, I go, oh man, God protected me from this.
That's right.
By not allowing me the desire of my heart there. Oh, and when I wanted to do this, he actually stopped this and moved me out of the way. So now that I'm here, oh, look at how God's hand was protecting me in this moment from here to there. Looking back at what the Lord has done in your life encourages you to move forward in your life. A lot of times you want to look on and you go, I can't believe the Lord won't let me. No, change that thought. Go back and look at what you wanted to do, how the Lord stopped you from doing that, and where you are now. And then the attitude changes.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that the Lord protected me from that. Obviously, the Lord is stopping me right now from, and what is it? Buying a new car, buying that new house, going to this new job, whatever it is. How come God's not allowing my prayers to be answered? He actually is answering your prayer because he's got a better plan for you. Yeah. And so looking back, I'm so glad.
It's not that we don't get to, right? It's not, God, why don't I get to? But instead it's, God, what are you preparing me so that I get to do that thing?
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of times people are scared to move forward. They're scared to say, hey, I think this is what I'm supposed to do, but I don't want to go and do that. Joshua 1:9, have I not commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid, nor be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go.
That's right.
So as you're transitioning, as you're going into this new direction, wherever the Lord is calling you to go, whatever the Lord is calling you to do, the encouragement I want to leave you with is, do not be afraid.
Do not be afraid.
Be of good courage, because God is with you.
That's right.
And the reality is, we're all transitioning. You said it.
That's right.
Even in our transition, we are transitioning.
That's right.
It's an ongoing thing. I don't look back and go, all right, the Lord transitioned me from this job to this job, and now here I am.
Right.
No, he's continually transitioning me.
That's right.
Transition is a process or a period of changing from one state or condition to another. He's transitioning us in our mind, the renewing of our mind.
Transformation of our mind.
Right? Everything is a continual transition. Yeah. And that's what I want people to be reminded of. Yes, you transition from one place to another, from one thing to another, but you said it best. We're continually transitioning. And I want us to all remember that. But most importantly, trust in the Lord. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him.
Yeah.
And he will direct your path.
That's right.
We want to thank you so much for taking this opportunity, taking this time to listen to the Reality Is podcast, where we talk about real life and real faith. We look forward to hearing from you. Please let us know what you guys would like for us to talk about, and we'd love to talk about it with you. For now, we want to say God bless you and have a great day.